In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Max.
And I'm still the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to WoT the Adaptation. We're moving on to something new. We've been covering fantasy so far. Now we're going to explore our science fiction geek side. We are going to be reviewing episode 1 tonight of The Expanse from Sci-Fi Channel originally. It's based on the novel Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, which is the joint pen name for Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. What'd you guys think of this episode?
I'm super excited to talk about it. I think it's a pretty solid episode.
Max?
Honestly, when I first saw The Expanse season 1, and even to like this day, I always felt like the first episode was like the slowest.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was the hardest to get into.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that.
You know, after reading the book, I felt like they had a lot of excess drama on the first episode.
They did add some drama.
I really didn't really care. I didn't really care for that extra drama.
But on the other hand, maybe it would have been slower if that hadn't been in there. You know,
Hard to say.
I mean, like, I totally get why they ended where they did, right? Like the destruction of the can.
Oh, yeah.
To end the episode, like you have to do it. So like they've basically covered like the prologue and the first 5 chapters of the book. And like those are kind of slow. You're kind of establishing the world and what's happening and with the different factions. But yeah.
Still, it's an overall fairly good episode.
Yeah, I think it does a lot, even though there's not a ton of action. But then you get that very beginning too, with that kind of shows you that like there's more going on here. I feel like that's really important in the book as well as the show. Like get that little hint of what's going on with Julie, because that's a big mystery.
Yeah.
To let us know there's something bigger going on.
And it was actually still a mystery for me watching the show
going
forward, as opposed to when I read the book last year, and then again last couple of weeks. I'm like, oh, okay, this makes so much more sense now of what's going on.
Yeah, I remember like when I first watched this first episode and like that little bit of Julie, like the whole time as I'm watching the season, I'm like, okay, when are we going to learn more about that? Like, when are we going to see more of what is going on with that? Because that is like, what the heck?
Right.
And yeah, it takes a while.
Do you guys want to dive in?
Let's dive in. So talking about changes from the source material, starting with ones we liked. And I think it's funny to me, like I got the impression that like there's overall an awful lot of similarity between this episode and the first, prologue and first 5 chapters, but there are some pretty significant changes too. So who wants to start?
I guess I'll start off. This is actually a change for season 1 as a whole over book 1, is the inclusion of Avasarala.
Of course, yeah.
Show Agnes Liu. I mean, this show, she owes so much to the show, and I have a feeling Wheel of Time's going to owe a lot to this show because of putting her in the public consciousness. But she's so just a delight. Even when she's supposed to be a nasty person, like during the interrogation, she's just so wonderful to watch.
Well, I think, I was thinking about that because like, she has that scene, which is her, the biggest scene for her in this episode where she's doing some, terrible interrogation, torture. That's a tough look. But they did show that first scene of her with her grandson and her husband to show us a little bit that, she's not like just this cold-hearted person. She's got layers. So but yeah, I mean, it kind of sets up an arc for her to be on because that's a tough scene.
Also, I really liked at first I wasn't happy with it, and then I changed my mind, making Havelock a rookie. like making him Holden's new partner on the station, because
Miller.
What did I say? Holden? Yeah, I meant
Is it
Miller.
Holden? Yeah.
Miller's partner on the station. It gives a lot of ability for the writers to throw in exposition.
True.
Because he's having, he's literally having to explain to his new partner on the first day of the job all these different things that we need to know. And so,
yeah, that's a good point. What I noticed mainly about Havelock is that, at least in this episode, we don't really get as much of the sense of the anti-inner sentiment towards him, and the fact that like no one wants him as a partner because he's an earther.
right.
Like that, just in this episode, that was in those first chapters, like right away, and we don't get that at this point. So that's sort of a change, but maybe it would have been a lot to put into the episode perhaps. But you're right about making him a rookie makes it easier to throw in some exposition for him. So
there's one other change that I got to bring up, because I don't know if I'm in support of it or opposed to it, and that's the demotion of James Holden, the second officer, instead of first officer, because it really didn't do anything except give us crazy old drunk guy standing barefoot in the dirt.
Jonathan Banks.
It was really like all that was to give him that scene, and then have the captain, here, you be the XO, or acting XO.
Yeah.
I don't see that it added anything.
I wonder if some stuff got cut about it, but well, what I thought about that change was that it's like it makes Holden a lot more reluctant. I mean, in the book he's already XO, and he even has this like little quip about how he likes Captain McDowell's chair, like implying that he might like to be captain. Right. Whereas in the show, it's like, no, he's not on that path at all. So, I mean, that's, I think, the heart of the change and why they did that. But, it's not really anything so much in this episode. It's just sort of a change for Holden's character. Yeah. And, the fact that he's, well, I don't know, we're not talking, I mean, this show is so old. Can we talk about what's happening? Like, obviously, even at the end of the episode, right? Like, the Cant is destroyed. There's no captain left. Like, Holden is going to be in a leadership position, whether he likes it or not.
Right.
And this is making that a little bit more of a conflict for him. I mean, already there would have been conflict because they lost their crewmates, but there's a little bit more conflict.
When I steamed through the book, I recall them saying something kind of like it felt like they kind of merged the character but split him as well. Like didn't they say in the book the captain was an older guy?
Yes.
And he's a belter. He's also a belter in the book.
He is a belter. You're right. Yeah, he doesn't look like a belter in the show. They don't really talk about it, but he doesn't look like a belter.
Like, I seem to recall them saying like he was having a tough time recovering from like their whatever, and that's where I was like, "What's wrong with the captain?" When I first saw the old guy, and like, "Oh, that's his XO." Like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know. My thought is they totally did it to just add a little change or layer to Holden's character and ending up in charge. But I do wonder if some things ended up on the cutting room floor too, because like you said, the XO character has one scene. I don't know, he's a recognizable actor to me anyway. Like, I just wonder if there was more of him that didn't make it in the episode.
It honestly feels like he was the captain and he got like demoted because he's insane.
Maybe.
Or not. But McDonald, or whatever the captain's name, we do know on the show he's an Earther because he shows up in the prologue of season 6 at the very end of the finale.
I don't remember that.
The most recent episode of The Expanse to air shows him hiring Holden because he was playing poker or something in a bar, or was drinking with belters and just totally wasn't understanding belters.
Oh.
And he saw Holden understanding belters, so that's why he approached Holden, was because Holden knew how to talk to belters.
Okay. All right then. Yeah,
You know,
he seemed like an earther, but yeah.
The other thing you mentioned is like his reluctance. One of the things that was being constantly repeated throughout the books was Holden being so righteous.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of that side of his character.
So what I felt like as far as Holden's character in the show versus the book, I felt like they're playing up the part of him that's just kind of like, I'm hiding out here. I've sort of given up, right? I mean, that is in the book, right? The fact that anybody who's on the cant is hiding from something. Like they are underqualified or they've screwed up somehow. Like everybody who's there is like there for some reason like that. And we know he got kicked out of the Navy. So it's playing up that side of him at the beginning, as opposed to the more of the righteous side, the I need to do right. Like we don't see that from him at the beginning. We sort of see him with some of that in this episode, like when he logs the distress call and when he initially wasn't going to. But
that's a whole
other change. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be discussed.
Okay, all right, so we'll hold off on that, but I just feel like the addition of the EXO character is playing up Holden's like, I'm hiding out here. Like I've screwed up and I'm hiding out here and I'm not going to try that hard. Basically, I'm just going to kind of coast. And I think that's more evident in this episode because of that.
Okay. Those are the things that I had.
Okay.
The 3 changes that, one of which, him being demoted, I didn't quite feel either way, but I wanted to mention, but the inclusion of Avasarala and making Havelock a rookie instead of like a partner that he's had for a while.
Right. And by the way, on Avasarala, like adding her in as a perspective, I mean, I think there's so many reasons to do it, but the biggest thing, I remember like in reading the book is like wondering like, what the heck is going on with Earth this whole time? Like what is going on there? So having her in the mix, like you get that Earth perspective of what's going on. Yeah. So I think that's important.
Opens up the politics, especially with giving Earth a POV.
Yes. So Max, what else do you want to add?
I didn't really have much for likes. Glenn basically covered like Avasarala. So I mean, how can you not like her?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody who doesn't can just get out.
Apparently Julie already did.
Yeah.
There weren't many changes I'd say I disliked, but things that just kind of stuck out to me. One I'm not sure I really liked so much was Holden's game, if you want to call it that. In other words, his ability to charm the women.
Oh.
Like
okay.
Naomi had alluded that he had maybe 10 partners. And in the very first part of the book, you see he's trying to go somewhere with the lady and she's just denying him.
Well,
and the first thing we see in him
she's saying not tonight.
Well,
because she makes it quite clear he's just a piece of ass for her.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that she's denying him. I think she's just not interested in being his girlfriend. I think that's showing more of like what Naomi says about how he romanticizes things that aren't romantic, right? Like he has this like, friendly hookup kind of situation with Ade, but he wants to romanticize it and Ade just sees it for what it is, which is not serious.
And it kind of felt like they didn't quite do that as well.
Okay, interesting.
It just felt like he was had too much game.
Okay.
And he is not as oblivious towards that stuff as I want to say he is in the books. But of course, on TV, they have to show the nudity and the sex.
That's true. Yeah.
It's the ratings.
Okay.
One other change I noticed is when Julia Ma was trapped in that thing, definitely not the same location they're talking about in the book. Like she was literally in a locker, and this is like a whole room she was in.
Well, it's a locker big enough to keep a spacesuit or two, because she didn't have that much space.
That's true. She doesn't
really have that much space. It's maybe the size of 3 or 4 of the locker size you would expect, like high school locker, like that kind of locker. This is big enough for an EVA suit.
Right. Which she does have in the book. But I hear you. Like it
looks like it's big enough for like 2 or 3 EVA suits, but it's still a closet to me.
Because when I
think the
saw the
biggest-
room, it looked like a walk-in closet. The amount of room she had to fly around and burst through the door.
Yeah. And the biggest change there, I thought, was just that, like, there's no sense of how long she's been in there,
That
right?
too.
Like, it's just
Right.
like, which is fine. Like, we don't need to have all that information at this
The
point.
book breaks it down by days.
Yeah, you get quite a lot of what she's been doing, but yeah.
Let's see.
It's
Pretty much the only other really relevant changes, because, like, obviously they're not gonna be able to find actors who could play Naomi as like a 6'8" something, very
Yeah.
scrawny, long arms.
I mean, that whole thing in general of just like how to cast belters, right?
Mhm.
Like, you kind of have to have a suspension of imagination or disbelief there, because no one, like, you're not going to find that many 6.5 feet tall, skinny people to play all these parts. So you just kind of have to go with it. On the other hand, the belter that Avasarala was torturing, whatever they did there made him look.
I believe that actor's probably really that big, tall, and lanky.
Yeah, maybe because it's an extra. Essentially, you can get someone who's more the body type you're looking for.
And the guy preaching to the crowd, Randy, giving a political speech, that guy was picked because he has the physical shape that you would match with a belter.
Yeah,
And
so they put it in there a bit.
Even with Miller, Thomas Jane as Miller.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a fairly tall guy who's fairly scrawny.
Yeah, I mean, he's and I would say similar with Dominique, Tipper. She's definitely slender and tall. She's just not towering over Holden like she's supposed to be.
She's shorter than all the rest of the the crew of the Rocky.
But it's tough with women. It's tougher with women because you're going to find even fewer women who are over 6 feet tall, and slim and whatever. But anyway,
like I said, those were changes I didn't really care about because, like, it's impossible.
You just got to go with it. So I have a couple things to add. So one change I noticed that I think is mainly to sort of streamline the timeline is that the Canterbury is like close to the knight when they're attacked. Like, as opposed in the book, they're far away. The Canterbury is attacked, and Holden and their small little crew has to try and race back to the Canterbury, and they go on the juice, and so that whole sequence is like a chapter that they've just cut out that time by making the Canterbury like right there.
They kind of have to do that though to set us up for, because otherwise space battle is okay. Launch missiles. 6 hours later, have they reached the ship yet? No, they're halfway there.
Right.
It's like reading David Weber's Honor Harrington series, where he puts space battles at the distances you would actually expect. Not like what you see in Star Trek or Star Wars, where ships are literally within seeing distance of each other. Where you go up against another enemy ship, you know what their paint job is. In the Expanse, you don't know.
Yeah, but I think it just made that whole sequence of the episode much shorter, which is fine, right? You don't have the tension of, are they going to make it there? But instead, you get some other tension earlier in the episode, which again, we'll get to. Then the only other thing I noticed is that they've added this character of Octavia in the Star Helix, that the young woman that Miller is talking to.
The murder, the apartment with the murder was done?
No, they're in like a bar, and
okay, I know who you're talking. Athena Karkarin or Karkaris.
Yeah, so that's added. So we get her, and we sort of get so there's some additions that are, I think, somewhat taking place of the fact that there's less Havelock in this episode. So you have her, and you have that Vargas character that he's like throwing out the airlock. So with Miller, you get. I think what that does is somewhat give more of a illustration of his character, and he's like everyone there, they're not following all the rules, but we get to see a little bit of like, yes, he's jaded as all hell, but he cares a little bit, right? Like there's that little bit of I care in there that we can see.
So funny thing about reading the book is, like, I hated reading Miller's chapters.
Okay.
But I liked reading Holden's chapters. So as everyone got to Miller chapter. It's like reading the
Not
parent.
this guy again.
It's like the parent hunt sequence all over again.
Oh, okay.
Like, I just want to get the Rand or something.
My second time through, I actually really enjoyed the Miller chapters over the first time through.
What do you think you didn't like about it, Max?
I'm not entirely sure, but at the end of the novel, it was the opposite. I like Miller's chapters better than Holden's, partly because you're like, what the hell's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And he also calls Holden out on his righteousness.
Yeah.
True.
And Miller's a case study in mental illness.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting about reading Miller is that he's an unreliable narrator.
I don't know how unreliable he is, though. When we get further into the season, I will bring up my theory. I've got something going. Okay. When we get further into the season, I'll bring up my theory about what he's seeing or what he's not seeing, and how that ties into, in future seasons, somebody else seeing something. But
I think I know where you're going with that, and that's something I was pondering about, is the validity of that.
Yeah.
One person's connection to the other, if that's true in this one.
Yeah. I'm thinking that some of these hallucinations we experience in the first book are actually there. Because in season 2, it's further seasons, somebody is seeing something who we have every reason to believe is there, because they're getting actual real information that they did not have from this hallucination. So it makes me wonder, is there a chain of hallucinations that are actually real going on here?
Yeah.
So
stuff to look forward to.
Definitely.
All right. So I think the last thing, which I don't know if we want to talk about now, is just the fact that, again, we start off, they're going to ignore the distress call, and then Holden secretly logs it. So you seem like you have a problem with this, Glenn. You don't like it.
This makes everybody on the camp, except for Ade Nygaard instead of Ade Tecumbo, makes Ade she's the only decent person on the crew, and everybody else on the camp is an asshole. And then it makes Holden look like the asshole to Naomi and everybody else if and when they find out, because he's the one who sent the signal, the signal to HQ, which made them have to go. So in essence, Holden just killed everybody on the camp. Holden's decision to send that along caused them to go, which led to the camp being destroyed. So now Naomi has every reason to be hating on Holden. And when the other 3 find out, they're going to have every reason to hate on Holden.
I mean, okay, so sure. But what I would say there is, it's not necessarily a bad thing to give Holden a reason for feeling that. He would very well feel that sense of responsibility. Now, he could never have anticipated that happening. It was a completely unpredictable thing that happened there. And as for everybody else hating him when they find out, again, potential source of tension there, but also at that point, they're all they have left, right? Everybody else is dead. So I don't mind this change, because
it's been so long since I watched season 1 that I don't remember if it does come out. So I'm actually re-watching season 1, almost going in fresh from a perspective of what the series shows.
I'd mentioned that, by changing it to them hiding this signal, it's totally within Holden's character to make that public.
Yes.
100% within character to do what he did.
I think so too. And it's almost him sort of somewhat discovering that side of his character, because again, he's living in this, well, I don't really care, I'm just doing the bare minimum kind of moment. But
on the other side of it,
breaking through a little bit for him.
On the other side of it, they do kind of take away from the whole belter aspect of their culture of, if you have a ship in distress, you have to go. No one's going to not, ignore this.
I mean, maybe the fact that in this case, Captain McDowell is not a belter might help explain that difference there. It doesn't necessarily explain why Naomi seems okay with not.
Or the rest of the crew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of them aren't, that we get to know, aren't belters, right? Like, you know, Naomi is the only belter that we get to know at all in on the show from the Canterbury. Yeah.
Because like you know, like the very intro like kind of gives you the rundown of the universe. Like, you know, they literally say oxygen is more valuable than gold for belters.
Mm-hmm.
And like they had a kind of opportunity to kind of show like how they're culturally different than Earth, and how you either take certain things extremely seriously, whereas you don't take that stuff seriously at all if you're from Earth.
No.
Not to the same level.
Yeah, right.
Some stuff the Martians will, but even they've got atmosphere that they can convert to some extent.
But like I think Miller in the books talks about, like, you know, if you have some guy who's slacking on duty and doesn't change a filter and causes some mold, you're gonna just space that guy.
Right.
Like
Which we
almost
actually see him almost do. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's like that's a kind of a belter thing, is like you gotta do these things. And like one of those things is also helping ships that are stranded.
Right. You don't leave people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like the I don't know if you want to use that quite word, but like the bipolar nature of like you completely kill someone who screws up, whereas you also have to help people that are stranded.
Yeah. So I think going through all that, I would say overall, I think this change makes sense, and it's a good addition in terms of figuring out, you know, character and tension in the episode. The only thing I would probably do differently based on what you're saying, Max, is have Naomi be the one who is upset by it, not Ade. Although I have no idea if Ade is supposed to be an Earth or Belter. I have no idea. But
in the book, she's from Earth because she's from Nigeria.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
She's actually. That's why I made the point in Ade Takumbo. They whitewashed the character.
They certainly did whitewash the character. I mean, I'm not going to get too fussed about it because this show is pretty diverse, but yes, they absolutely
with the diversity they had, I don't know why they did that to this character. I mean, they had to change her name to do it.
Yeah.
I'd say, wasn't there a comment in the book about her being described a certain way, like Naomi's similar, like she has a very mixed something?
I think they don't even describe.
Shadid is described as something ambiguously colorized or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
You know,
no, I don't think it's Ade, because Ade isn't described. You just know that she's Nigerian. You're right.
Okay. I was thinking like he called her like some kind of queen or something. I don't know.
I don't remember that.
I don't know.
I don't know. And I just listened to it earlier today, so at least up through the camp being destroyed.
All right, so I think we covered it. I mean,
I have one little thing I want to nitpick, and this is gonna not to the level of a rant, but you don't design airlock doors like that, especially at least the interior airlock door where it slides open and closed. You want it to hinge inward. That way, on the inner door, if you still have air pressure on the inside the ship and the outer airlock door is open, the door is forced closed by the air pressure. I have never liked seeing airlock doors that slide, and this isn't even a pocket slide where it slides and locks in. This is two that just come and meet each other like that. That's just.
What about the Stargate circle doors?
No, see, those are real because wormholes. You know, the iris on the wormhole, that it's all science fiction-y. You know, nanites and everything or something. I don't know. I'll blame it on Star Trek or Stargate. Then we'll just blame it on Stargate. But no, I hated those airlock doors. It's the worst. It's worse in my opinion than the waygates for Wheel of Time, because it just makes no scientific principle. It just. Okay, I'll leave it be. I just had to get that off my chest.
Did they ever describe the doors like the way you say in the books?
They never described it all.
Yeah, I don't think it's described.
I was just thinking, like, I know they talked about a lot of insane material sciences in the book.
Right. But pretty much any science fiction you're going to read that especially a show or a book that's so hard on the hard science, you would think they would get a little design choice right, because everything you watch is going to be an inner door that angle comes in, except Star Trek. But that's Star Trek too, where they have energy shield that can hold air in.
One reason why it could obviously be I think they did the same reason for Star Trek, is it has to do with cameras. It's easier to have people on the side opening a door open than it is to have an opening door towards the camera or away from the camera.
Something like that.
It's cheaper. It's cheaper. But
just for like set design, that's probably why versus.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's like trying to make a spacesuit out of a colander.
Because can you imagine trying to run a camera and having to have those doors open while running backwards through it?
Yeah. I've seen it in plenty of science fiction with actual airlock-looking doors. I had to get it off my chest. I figured the first episode was the place to do it.
Okay, there you go. So, let's talk about any standout scenes for us. And Max, do you have a standout scene for you?
Honestly, not really on this episode. There wasn't anything that really just stood out. I mean, I like the graphics of the show. I like how they kept it pretty hard sci-fi in a lot of aspects of like not having sound in space was pretty big.
Yeah, that doesn't last.
And a lot of shows still don't get that right.
Even this show gets that wrong eventually. I do believe they start adding sound to space.
Season 6.
Well before then, because just audiences expect it.
Yeah.
There were
trying to.
I would say there are in later seasons times where it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. But that's neither here nor now. But yeah, there was nothing I really enjoyed about this episode. I didn't hate anything either. This is really slow, over dramatic in aspects. If I liked anything, it's any scene Amos was actually in or talking.
He didn't have a lot in this, but maybe there's that scene where he like pulls the transmitter out and Holden thinks it's a bomb for a second. That's like kind of the most we got.
For me, I don't really have any scenes that like seriously stand out as like favorite scenes. There's imagery that has stuck in my head since the very first time I saw it a few years ago.
Okay.
Like the bird flying, hovering because of the low G. And that probably would be what most birds could find they can do in a low G atmosphere like that. The image of the OPA guy on the hooks.
Yeah.
That stuck in my head from the very first time I ever watched this show.
Yeah, that does stick with you, yeah.
Back to season 1. And even in that scene, I actually really do enjoy that scene because it shows, the shades of gray that make up Christian Abasarala. It's just, but the closest I have to a dislike is the whole, and it ties into that change they made that we talked about of them just deciding whether or not to answer the distress beacon, to the scopuli.
So the scene where like they're agreeing not to do it, basically. Yeah.
And speaking of the scopuli is from Greek mythology. That's the beaches, the rocks upon which the sirens sit when they lure men to their doom.
Love it.
Wow, they picked a really good name for the ship to lure them in. Totally. I caught that earlier today because I didn't know where the name came from. I just happened to look it up. I'm like, oh, well, that was really clever.
I came across that as well. I liked it.
Yep. That was, but I mean, the only other thing is I hated the fact that we don't like, and it comes most to the forefront in the scene in the apartment for that prostitute where the guy was dead. I wish they had used more subtitles to translate all that Belter speech, the Belter Creole, because reading it in the book and listening to it in the book doesn't make it any easier.
No, it's the same in the book. Yeah, on the Belter Creole, I think it must be deliberate because it's the same way in the book where mostly it's not ever translated for you. And
Okay.
I mean, maybe it's deliberate to make you feel like someone like Havelock would, who doesn't. Yeah, I don't find it too off-putting in The Expanse, but I do, wish I understood more of that. But, yeah.
Right.
So for me, on any standout scenes, I mean, I agree. This episode didn't like. It's not as there's not as many highlights or lowlights in this episode, perhaps. One thing I will say overall that I got an impression on in this episode was just the way it did kind of create a sense of the difference in the way Belters live versus inners. And so I think it did, this episode most of all just kind of helped establish some of those conflicts and stakes in the world and the story. So I think that was probably its strongest point overall, this episode. But that's not a single scene. I will also add that I liked the scene between Holden and Naomi, where he is confessing that he was the one who logged the distress call. I think it sets up some, nice things in their characters and going forward. I think, that was a scene I enjoyed. But any scenes I didn't like, I mean, I didn't have anything that I didn't like. I think the scene with Avasarala torturing the Belter does stand out, and again, maybe a little bit in a negative way because it's a pretty horrifying thing to see. But again, that's part of what drives home. Hey, this is how we can treat Belters, right? They're specifically using torture on him because of his physique, because of his differences in his body, right? So it's to the extent that there's race, it's a kind of racism.
No, it is, and they even call it racism in the book.
Yeah, they're really exploiting that in that. So that's a pretty dark, thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. That they do in the book refer to, I think it's a Miller chapter. He refers to his thought process as, refers to the difference as being racial.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's interesting because, like, you actually have a scenario where the differences in the race in this case, in this fictional world, are more real, right? Like there are more real physical differences between these different groups of people that in our world, the racial differences are minor compared to that.
And the differences that exist in this world, no matter what color skin they have or where on earth their ancestors came from.
So what you don't really see that, racism in this world due to skin tone because no one cares about that in comparison to all these other physical differences that people have.
Definitely.
Okay. Anything else to add on that?
Nothing else. For me on that, on sequences I hated or enjoyed. Although, because I complained about a design change that I disliked, let me bring up a design change I did like.
Okay.
Protomolecule.
Oh, me too.
I'm glad they went with this glowy black and blue stuff over
brown, gooey. Yeah.
Gross, gooey brown.
It looks much better on screen. Yes.
Way better. Not as likely to make you want to vomit.
Mm-hmm. But
especially
cool
when
and eerie and just looks
and it's
good.
Also high contrast.
Very good choice. I totally
agree. High contrast totally stands out. So, while I don't like the airlocks, I do like their protomolecule. So, I think that was an improvement.
Yeah, and you could say that might be even like a standout scene in the episode. Just that one shot we get of
when the guy comes up and she starts shrieking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's where the idea came, because I do kind of like that sequence there. You know?
Yep. I think
say
that
they
in some
kinda-
ways that is what stuck with me the first time, because again, I kept in my back of my head, like, when are we going to come back to that? I need to know more about that.
Trying to think of the movie, but aesthetically, it sounds like they went less Dead Space and more. I'm not sure
Okay.
Yeah.
what a comparison for this would be, but
This is way more sci-fi.
Yeah, it just
fiction-y.
looks better. Like,
well, like the
bottom line, it just
you know
looks better.
the proto-molecule, like they went less Dead Space, which is a video game. There's a movie, I can't think what it's right offhand, but it's Glenn might know it, maybe not, but it's a horror movie, so probably not. But it's the one where they fold space and go through a black hole and it goes through hell.
Oh, the scariest movie I've ever seen. Event Horizon.
Yeah.
Scared the piss out of me.
So, like, to me, it sounds like the pro molecule is like less, Event Horizon and more something else.
Okay.
Yeah, that video on Event Horizon was traumatizing.
Will not be watching that.
A good movie though.
I don't know. Not into horror.
I understand. I'm not either.
It probably doesn't help that both Event Horizon and Dead Space are probably in the genre of what they call like body horror.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of this proto-molecule is.
Yeah.
Very much body horror.
And
I don't mind like those horror elements in a story. Like, that's fine. I can deal with it. But for some reason, I'm just never going to be like, oh, that's the whole thing. No, I don't want it.
And completely off topic, but Event Horizon, which is kind of body horror, is some people have called it like the unofficial adaptation of Warhammer 40,000.
No.
Okay.
Not know that.
Because they have faster light travel. It punches a hole through hell.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And then there's body horror and things invading your ship and killing you in horrible ways.
Okay.
So I'm told.
Sounds delightful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are we ready to do some actor shout outs or call outs?
Yeah.
I guess I should start. Well,
Yeah.
because I haven't started, but for me, I'm gonna start with Thomas Jane. I think is already adding a lot to the character of Miller, who, is, as I said, in reading him, he's kind of an unreliable narrator. And so it takes a little while to kind of really understand, who this character is. But I think, you can already see some of those layers in him, even in this beginning episode. So
he's got a long ways from Thomas Drecker in Hung.
Have not seen it.
Or from whatchamacallit.
Or sorry, Ray Drecker, sorry.
Yeah.
Or from whatchamacallit in The Punisher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
He played The Punisher at one point.
Right.
Frank Castle, I think his name. Yeah, Frank Castle.
Yep.
Somehow, he's been in so many things, and I was like unfamiliar with him before this show. I don't know how.
I really like Thomas Jane on the show. Although I've noticed there's just like they did some minor motivation changes with Holden and those guys. He has in a small way. They did it in a small way with Miller, because in the book Miller isn't comfortable having to do a kidnap job.
True, that is different.
And on the show, when he asks Shadid, so what's the contract? She says kidnap, or he says, oh, kidnap job? Okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
I like it, it's. And I can't say that they're wrong changing motivations on characters, because they worked with Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, who are both producers on the show.
Right.
Just remember, we don't have his internal monologue either.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could have conveyed it without that. I noticed that difference too, and it's probably deliberate. It's probably just like we don't have time to have him be reluctant about this, and it might again be a way to show his jaded mindset that he has. We it's just not as much time to convey how jaded he is. So hey, we'll throw it in there too, and I think it's fine. I mean, it's not like he wasn't going to do it. He hesitated for like a second.
Yeah.
You know, in the book, it wasn't anything significant, but it, you know, it's there.
It changes his personality a little bit.
A little, yeah.
Which doesn't really affect anything going forward. It just, you know, the reasons of why, you know, and how happy he was doing what he, you know, had to do. But
yeah.
So,
anybody else have an actor they want to mention?
I wanted to bring up Stephen Strait.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier how good he was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just as watching him in panels, I would not have bought him as, you know, Holden at all.
Yeah.
Without seeing him on the show, and so yeah, Stephen Strait,
yeah.
damn good.
And he, you know, I liked him in that scene with Naomi. He also did some good work in the scene where he's just like going through the distress call. Like, so there's not a lot of dialogue in that scene, but it's just kind of him reacting to things, and he did a good job. Yeah.
And also should give props to Dominic Tipper.
She's great. She's really great. I mean, I didn't say much about her in this episode because it's like, you know, there's not as much going on for her yet, but she's great.
Only 3 people have really had much to work with this episode, and that was Shora, Thomas Jane, and Stephen Strait. So
yeah, and they're all really good. I mean, this cast is great. I love the cast.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, obviously we could always say Shora for every episode for the whole series, but
absolutely,
even episodes she might not be in, if there are any, she still was probably the best actor in those episodes.
Yeah, 100%.
Just wait until Drummer shows up, because then it'll be the same thing for her, because she's amazing. Even when she has like nothing going on, she's so good.
You know, I'd have to give shout outs to Wes and Dominique.
Okay.
Because, you know, Amos is just one of my favorite characters in this series.
Mm-hmm.
TV series, I haven't read much of them in the books yet.
How far have you read?
I read the whole book, and I'd like, compared to the TV show and the whole series, I haven't got that much of Amos yet.
You gotta keep reading.
Yeah.
How much have you read, Glenn?
Only the first book, and some of the novellas. A couple of the novellas.
All right.
Nothing past the end of the first book.
Okay.
I also have to give a shout out to that. Give a tiny shout out to the little rat Strait saw in the ship. I mean, I was very surprised to see Dandelion's rat.
The rodent actors, always.
I was very surprised to see Dandelion's friend on the ship.
Well, no, rat's got to work, you know.
This time he got to play an actual rat instead of having to play a mouse, though.
Yeah.
True.
But in space.
You know, it can't always be rat-tattooey. I mean, sometimes you got to do the thankless jobs.
Rats in space is a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So should we talk about themes? Is that where we're at? Okay. Okay. So Max, do you want to start us off? Any thoughts on themes in this episode?
Oh, it's a tough one. Like I said, this was a pretty slow, dramatic episode for me. Mm-hmm. Compared to the book versus the show, I'd say there are something to deal with the, you know, you guys kind of mentioned it earlier in the race side of things, of the different factions of Belters and humans, or Earthlings, or whatever you want to call them, just going at it, having their own kind of prejudices towards each other. That's, you know, kind of an obvious one. Aside from that, I can't really think of anything else that really stands out as a major theme, aside from something with Holden and his love interests, kind of. But they didn't really have quite enough time to explore his ineptitude in that area.
Yeah.
It felt like they really cut it short, where she's telling him, like, you know, I'm not interested in you in a relationship. She was like, I'm about to tell you, no, I got nuked.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something you need to. Oops.
Yeah, whatever that was, she was going to say.
I can take a wild guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing at that moment it wasn't going to be, I don't love you. That would be a little rough.
No.
I don't know. But... All right. So
my theory is that something came of their trysts together. Something that lasts a little bit longer, or like 9 months.
Oh boy, I hope it wasn't that. That's so cliche.
Honestly, I'd say that.
And I think that's why they had her die at that moment, so we don't actually hear her do the cliche.
In the
I don't
show
think
and the
it's
books, don't
anything.
they like force you to have like what do you call it, birth control pill and stuff like in your like daily regimen?
I don't remember.
Because like they're very tight on their.
You might be right, because everyone's out in space getting radiated all the time, so people like save their gametes in
But I thought there
safe
was something like
places.
they have something in like their diet or the vitamin regimen or something that prevents
I
pregnancy.
think there might have been mention of a pill that they could, like a morning after type pill at one point.
You might be right, again, just because of the dangerousness of, you know, pregnancy in
But
space.
also the population control that they have to 100% restrict
maybe.
in Belter.
Maybe.
No, it's not so much the Belters that are worried about population, it's Earth people.
Both.
30 billion.
Because you gotta remember, they have limited oxygen on their space station. They're stationed in ships.
Yeah.
So they can't just have 30 kids like the Mormons do.
That's why the Mormons are going to take off. Anyway, sidetrack. Yeah. So where were we going? Oh yeah, theme. Okay, so let me try to bring in some themes here. So one thing that to me I think is a subtle theme, but that I saw was, so Avasarala has a line where she says, when people don't tell the truth, it always ends badly. And I think that there might be a little bit of that, you know, as a theme running throughout. I think it certainly ties into Holden's character because, as we'll come to see from him, he's kind of like a radical truth teller. Like, let's just always tell the truth, right? But in this episode, he didn't entirely do that. I mean, we see a little bit of it where he confesses to Naomi the truth about logging the distress call. So that's that side of him coming through where like, I have to tell the truth. But he kept it a secret in the first place. So that's a little bit unlike him. And you could say it ended badly, right? Like that he did not tell the truth. It ended badly. And maybe that's going to influence him to, again, lean into his truth telling instincts more because of that. So that's one thing. And, you know, I don't know necessarily, it doesn't seem to have a broadly applied, you know, theme throughout the episode, but nevertheless, it was in there, and I could sort of see that coming into play, perhaps, or being a setup. Anyway, so that was one thing. And I had some thoughts on the title of the episode too, but I don't know if we want to save that if you have thoughts on that, Glenn, or other things you want to bring in first.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So we had some discussion off camera about the title of the episode, Dulcinea, what that means, and where it comes from. So it is a reference to Don Quixote, which is something that will be referenced again in the season and the book. So it's certainly drawn from that. And so just caveat here, I haven't read the book Don Quixote, but I'm like familiar with it because I've seen adaptations of it and such. So, but my understanding of the name Dulcinea, what it means is, you know, in the book, there is no woman named Dulcinea. It's just something that Don Quixote is sort of obsessed with because he thinks he's supposed to have, you know, a lady. He's supposed to have a lady. And of course, because she doesn't exist, she's just this idealized figure, you know. So, and anything that he imagines a woman is supposed to be. And so I don't think we see that very strongly in this episode, but we might see a little bit of it. So Julie as a character, you know, we'll see, she's not really a character. Like we'll see Julie again in the season, and she's not really a character. She is a Dulcinea type character. And so we're at least introduced to her, and that's going to be, I think, her role in the story is that kind of a figure. And then again, it's not super well developed, but we have the character of Ade, who I think it's more evident in the book is a bit like that to Holden, and not just her, but in general, he has that tendency to kind of idealize and fictionalize various relationships that he has with women to make it into more than what it is. So it's not really the real thing, you know, and it takes him a while to figure out what that is. So I think you could see it a little bit with her too. And so his Dulcinea and his chance at having other Dulcineas is gone, and he's going to have to let that go and move beyond that.
Yeah.
So there.
I was gonna bring up some of the same stuff with the Dulcinea, because she's really literally is not there. There is no such person in the book. It's just this idea, and I guess the name in Spanish translates basically like sweetness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From what I saw, so kind of describes, you know, what Thomas Jane's character Miller starts doing in his head with Julie Mao.
Mm-hmm.
Spoilers for the rest of this season. I'll put a warning. Because he really does make her into this idealized concept of a woman.
Yeah.
Not even so much just as a woman, but as a person in general. But
right.
Specifically in his case, for him, you know, as a woman, because in the books, it's pretty clear by the end of the book that he had fallen in love with the idea of Julie Mao.
Right.
You know,
someone he's never met.
Yeah, someone he's never met, only knows from her own videos and her own diary and her own letters that she writes. But, you know, that's not to say he didn't get a good grasp on who she was to some extent. You know,
yeah, sure, but it's like falling in love with a fictional character in that sense, right? Like you might know a lot about them from reading about them, but they're not a person to you. So
right.
So, you know, my random thought here is, you know, spoilers for the rest of the season, but would the protogen be Deckard's Dulcinea?
Deckard?
What do you mean?
The sorry, Dresden. I said Dresden, not Deckard.
You mean Miller? Dresden? That's wrong shirt.
The scientist.
Oh.
Okay, I know who you mean. Oh, the guy in the white suit in the book. Okay.
Yeah.
The one that, you know, orchestrated the whole events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could the protogen be his Dulcinea?
The protomolecule. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I can see how you would go that. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, we don't really have that in this episode, but I hear you.
No.
I feel like the title is just more of a setup than anything, because we don't really see Julie as a Dulcinea character
It
yet.
seems a little soon for the use of Dulcinea, but I mean, the first character we do see after all in the show is Julie Mao.
Yeah.
We spent 4 or 5 minutes with her, I think. So, I was gonna bring up the one that I noticed the most. We already sort of discussed it. It's not so much the racial differences, even though there are physical differences between the Belters and the Inners, but the class differences.
Yeah.
Are very much so there, and I think, I mean, yeah, at this point in the future history, race is becoming an accurate way to describe it, because no matter what their ethnic background is, they are becoming a race unto themselves, you know. But it's not just the people on the belt, but even people on Luna and Mars, because I mean, Mars is 1/6 the gravity, and Mars is 1/3, and the moon's 1/6 of the gravity. That's not all that much better gravity than what they're getting.
I think with Mars, they talk about how like they train in 1G all the time or something like that. Like they have the technology so that they spend enough time in it. I don't know. Yeah. But it's also cultural differences too. I'll just add, like there's vast, we don't really get a full sense of that yet, but vast cultural differences between these various
very
groups,
much.
You know, that was something I always kind of wondered on the books, is like they speak Creole. So did a lot of people come from, like, you know, the South for speaking Creole?
Creole is the word for a merged together, a hodgepodge language. Yeah. That's what a Creole is.
So I'm thinking like equivalent to.
I'm thinking like say 100 years ago, a bunch of people from Louisiana flew up to. That, or you have the Creole being a mix of English and French. You have
it's its own
you have
mix.
India, which has a large speaking English population, and you have people in various parts of Africa who speak French.
Yeah.
And if they're the first ones in space, you mix the French and English, and you got what we know as Creole today.
There's definitely other things mixed in there too. Like you can tell, as you get more of it throughout the series, that there's quite a mix of languages that are melded together into its own thing.
What we saw on the TV show Firefly and the movie Serenity was a Creole with you working in of all the Chinese terms. They were speaking, in essence, a form of Creole. We just happen to understand a good chunk of it because we're English speakers. So, yeah, but a Creole is just any kind of hodgepodge, blending together of languages or cultures.
Yeah. Because the only thing that they mention, and similar to what you said, Max, is about in Mars, the reason why Alex and other certain Martian characters from the Mariner Valley speak with that twang is because there were at one point a lot of Texans that settled there, and so that then became a dialect.
Apparently it's viral.
Apparently
that's how they phrased it in the book, was that it's viral.
Yeah, so
makes sense.
That's why he's got the South Asian heritage and the Texan drawl, because those are groups that populated the Mariner Valley.
Yeah, I really love that aspect.
It was cool.
Also, the another theme that was just used on lightly here was the use of torture and interrogation.
Yeah.
And to make a point, because you could also count when Miller throws death into the airlock, because that's the guy who played Death on Supernatural.
Oh, is that who that was? Okay. Yeah,
I recognized him the first time. Because that was basically using torture with the fear of death as a means of sort of interrogation.
Yeah.
But
presumably this kind of thing happens a lot in the Belt.
Yeah. But other than that, you guys brought them up. This episode was really light on it because it had a lot of other work to do.
Definitely.
It had a lot of setup and exposition to get out of the way, and not a lot of time to deal with any kinds of themes or messaging.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
I think this was a great episode to start us off with, you guys.
I would just mention that the first season was on Sci-Fi, correct? The first three?
Mm-hmm.
First four?
Really? No, I thought it was
2
3
seasons on Amazon.
Okay. Yep. So, for time constraints, they were under a lot more pressure than under Amazon.
Very true. They had to fit it in. Yeah, certain
time constraint. The 42 minutes or whatever.
For sure.
Well, thank you, audience. Did anybody else have anything before I wrap up?
I wasn't a big fan of the lighting in the episode.
Too dark?
It's in space.
Just in general, the lighting was just, I don't know. I blame it on Sci-Fi, basically. They were going with the Battlestar Galactica lighting.
Well, they did have the look of, the concourse there on series was pretty well lit compared to anything you'd see on BSG.
That looked pretty schmancy, really, compared to how I was picturing. I mean, so clearly they're showing you different parts of series. Like that's the class difference again that they show there.
But that's all I really had to mention.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, audience, for checking us out on our first episode discussing The Expanse, Season 1. We'll be continuing for the next 9 weeks or so, and hope to see you back. Please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to be awesome.